Could we be finally heading towards what I consider to be the big split in college football? Ross Dellinger has put out a report that talks about a revenue sharing model and explain why that could be a bad thing for us, especially in the Big 12. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode of Mountaineer Paul Talks Football is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing. Only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. And then this video is sponsored by Magic Shine Auto Spa and Tent in Morgantown, West Virginia. At Magic Shine, your vehicle's care is their top priority. They use only the highest quality products to ensure your car not only looks the best, but is also protected and maintained with the utmost care. From window tinting to top-of-the-line Max Pro tint to protective ceramic coating, Diamond Pro Tech, they've got you covered. Drive in today and experience the difference at Magic Shine Auto Spa and Tint, where your car shines like new. Shine on, Morgantown.
This is for Cameron.
What is up, guys? Welcome back in. My name is Mountaineer Paul. This is another edition of Mountaineer Paul Talks Football, where we talk about college football, Big 12 football, realignment, a little bit of everything. Today is going to be a realignment topic, and one that, to be honest, is a little bit scary for especially some of us in the Big 12, right? Because at the end of the day, we just want to be able to play for the Natty like everybody else does, no matter how silly it sounds to those outside of West Virginia, the Big 12, what have you. Ross Dellinger put out a report and basically talked about a college football revenue sharing model and what that could look like in an article. And let's go ahead and pull that up and read it really quick. It's a little bit long. I'm going to go over it as fast as I could. And then I'm going to really talk about what worries me the most with this model. So it says right here, sources, new college athlete compensation model may cost power schools $300 million over 10 years. A bag slung over his shoulder and luggage in his hand, Baylor football coach Dave Aranda hustled down the main staircase at the Hyatt Gainey Ranch after the Big 12 conference meetings. He buzzed through the lobby for a quick hello and then jettisoned out the door with a destination in mind. I'm going to see the Arizona Cardinals, he said. Got to learn how to do all this. College coach or administrator visiting a professional sports organization is not necessarily groundbreaking, but Aranda's visit, presumably to learn more about roster management and pay scale, the college sports industry is moving closer to the inevitable, a direct athlete compensation model. As industry executives continue to negotiate with plaintiff lawyers in the House antitrust case, details of future compensation model, a necessary piece to any settlement agreement, continue to emerge. Those who shared details were granted anonymity as they were not authorized to speak about the proposed settlement that continues to undergo changes. While negotiations are active and have been for as many as 8 months, not a new revelation within the industry, concepts of the proposed new model are becoming more formalized as leaders work to meet a deadline set by attorneys. Money figures are becoming clear, and for those in power conferences, the price tag is steep. 10-year settlement agreement can cost each power school as much as $300 million over the decade, or $30 million a school. That figure assumes a school meets what is believed to be, number one, $17 to $22 million revenue distribution for cap for athletes, and at least $2 million in withheld NCAA distribution for back damages. And number three, as much as $10 million in additional scholarship costs related to an expansion of sport-specific roster sizes, a concept previously unpublicized. The $30 million price tag, a startling feature for an industry that has only provided athletes with mostly non-cash resources, is about 20% of the average athletic department budget of public schools in the ACC, Big Ten, SEC, and Big 12. However, as reported earlier this week, the revenue sharing portion of the new model is permissive, meaning schools are not required to reach the cap or share revenue at all. Schools will also have the discretion to expand scholarships or not across new roster limits expected to be implemented across all sanctioned sports. While concepts are murky and questions linger, a framework of a new model is becoming more visible and socialized with high-ranking administrators across the four power conferences. Meanwhile, that deadline within the next 40 days is approaching quickly. The financial concept to any new model involves the implementation of roster limits and the expansion of scholarships across those limits. For instance, under the current rules, the NCAA permits schools to distribute 11.7 scholarships across a baseball roster of 32 players. Under this new model, schools may now choose to provide a scholarship to each roster position. However, many are determined for that specific sport. The same goes for other sports, including football, which could see its roster limit actually reduced. The NCAA recently increased the football roster limit preseason camp from 110 to 120. The expense of increasing scholarships is significant. Two power conference administrators told Yahoo Sports they plan to add more than 100 scholarships at the expense of $9 to $10 million annually. A portion of the additional scholarship expense may be counted towards revenue sharing cap, but that too is a fluctuating figure. So there are a few worries for me with this, but let's kind of go over what it is exactly this article is telling us in layman's terms, because, you know, if you're like me, sometimes I just need it broken down Barney style, right? It obviously moving away from the NIL has to be done. It's not sustainable. We all know that. Revenue sharing seems like the next big step. And if they capped it and everything stayed the same, I think that would be very beneficial to all universities. There would still be a pay gap, absolutely, between the ACC, Big 12, Big 10, and SEC. But at least the money would basically be the same. Now you're talking about facilities. Now you're talking about coaching, right? And everybody has a seat at the table, hopefully, at that point. The SEC and Big Ten really only wanted the money anyways, right? So that would be positive. But one thing to consider before I get into that, in the context of football, the article basically suggests that schools may have the option to provide scholarships to more players than they currently have, right? And under the current rules, teams may have a set number of scholarships they can distribute across the roster, which right now is 120. And the new model could allow scholarships to provide scholarships to each position on the roster, which basically increases the number of players who receive financial support, y'all. So expanding, if you want to talk about benefits, we'll go there first. What could that do for you? What could that do for your school? Well, it could improve depth, right, at positions. Places like maybe linebacker, offensive line, corner, wherever you want to talk about. More players would be on scholarship rather than having some walk-ons, and teams could have greater depth at each position, which is, pretty big deal, especially with dealing with injuries. And you probably have greater quality of depth too, because you're paying people. Competition would be better, right? Because you've got good players pushing better players, and iron sharpens iron. We know that. It'd be great for retention. You're not going to see the transfer portal would be basically the antithesis of it as it is now, which I think could, at least you could develop players at that point. They may still be bought, but they can be developed. And then there's the recruiting advantage involvement here, because more scholarships you can offer might make your program more attractive. You could certainly buy higher quality of recruits, possibly, giving you a little bit of a competitive edge, which obviously is something that um, the bigger schools have done in the past, which is like kind of like almost like history repeating itself, right? If that were to happen. So, what are some things that I think could be bad about it? Well, number one, the walk-ons, right? One of the greatest things in college football is seeing the walk-ons. Places like Texas A&M that have had the entire kickoff team being all walk-ons, just amazing, and some of the best theater in college sports come at with walk-ons, and some of the best players in college football history have been walk-ons. Baker Mayfield comes to mind, so you eliminate that possibility. I mean, what if Baker Mayfield went to D2, never got discovered? In today's day and age, it's harder, but 10 years ago, not so much. My biggest concern to be the financial strain, especially on West Virginia, who is in the red, but athletic department / school budget are two different things, but increasing the number of scholarships awarded could raise the financial burden for our West Virginia, especially, or teams in the Big 12, or any team with limited resources. And so what would that lead to? It would lead to cutbacks in other areas, which is something that we probably need to consider. Absolutely. In my opinion, anyway. It's going to be a roster management hellhole, for lack of a better term. Can you imagine what coaches are going to have to deal with? I mean, you already saw Dave Aranda in that video going to learn from the Arizona Cardinals. He's not going to be the only one. Thankfully, West Virginia has Drew Fabianch. I think we've got a little bit of a head start on this thing. How much, I guess, will still have to be seen, but it's going to be challenging to allocate playing time, maintain the cohesion on the roster with the larger roster. It just is. You're going to run into Title IX stuff, which, expanding scholarships in football without similar increases in opportunity for female athletes is going to be a problem, guys. And thankfully, women's basketball took a big step this past year. But what about women's volleyball, women's gymnastics, you name it? To me, those are going to be issues that have to be hashed out. Will the girls get the same payment as the guys? It's going to be something they're going to want to talk about. I'm not saying it should be number one on the list, but it's definitely on the list. It's going to come up. And there's going to, just like there's advantages for them, there are going to be challenges for us, right? More scholarships can attract top talent, but it could also make recruiting more competitive, and so might find it harder to secure commitments from highly sought after recruits, which we kind of already do, but it could even make it worse, leading to increased recruiting costs and efforts. What about experience, guys? More players on scholarship, athletes may face increased competition for resources, playing time. That can impact the overall student-athlete experience, right? Satisfaction within the program, maybe lead to a lot of D2 guys going down to D2 to get playing time. And then the regulations, basically. Any change to this, it would have to comply with NCAA regulations and guidelines, and schools would need to navigate the rules pretty carefully to avoid sanctions and penalties. So, for me, it's a big deal. I think, this could lead to, especially if we're talking about being able to add scholarships in order to possibly buy up all, because if you allow a team like Alabama to add scholarships to however many they want, whatever, they're going to, and there's no cap possibly. I mean, you never know what could happen with this. I don't see it going that direction, but it could. It's over with. It'll be like Alabama in the 1950s or whoever it was that used to buy all the recruits, even the ones they didn't want to use. Yes, of course, there'll be players that are happy and they'll go back into circulation. But, those players will then go to Ole Miss or Mississippi State or other schools. So for me, it's a big deal. I worry about it, guys. So let me know how you feel about it. Curious to know your uh, take on this situation here, guys. And do you think I overreacted? Do you think I'm right on the mark? Like the video. If you don't like the video, at least drop a comment below and tell me how stupid I am. And if you're not going to do that, subscribe to Mountaineer Paul Talks Football. We're this close away from 2,000 guys. It would mean a ton if you guys could help me get there. Just trying to grow this thing, just trying to get bigger and better. Want to thank Dutch Miller Automotive and Magic Shine Auto Spa. Really great people involved in both of those situations for me, and I feel extremely grateful to be partnered with those awesome businesses. Thank you to the fans that watched the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Going to be talking to Penn State next on the show, guys. So keep coming back, as I always say. Don't forget to like the video, share it, do whatever you got to do. Keep feeding the monster I call the algorithm, and realize this has been another edition of Mountaineer Paul Talks Football. This episode is over. I am out.
This is for Cameron. Tim Kim.